The Soviet gunner 90 meters away just shifted his weight, or so it seemed to the American tank commander watching through his crosshairs. His finger tightens. Then he realizes the man didn't move. The vibration from 10 idling T-54s is shaking both tanks so hard that motion and stillness have become indistinguishable. Both crews have identical orders: fire if the enemy moves first. But there's a third force in the street now, and it's not taking orders from anyone. 6 hours ago, a border guard refused to stamp diplomat Allan Lightner's passport. One bureaucratic refusal. That single no has triggered a chain of escalatory steps, each decision pulling authority upward, each response removing from the street another officer with the power to say, "Stand down." The only two men who can stop this are trying desperately to communicate. One in Washington, one in Moscow. But in 1961, there is no direct line between them. Messages route through back channels, through intermediaries, through written cables that take precious minutes to encode and transmit. The American gunner's reticle drifts left to compensate for the shaking. Across the asphalt, the Soviet gunner makes the same microscopic adjustment. Neither knows the other just moved. The radios have gone silent. They are mirroring each other into oblivion, and the men who could break the sequence are waiting for messages that crawl when seconds matter. Every second of silence makes the vibration worse. Every minute without clear orders makes the double image in the gunner's optics harder to resolve. He's no longer sure which shadow is the tank and which is the echo. The gap between hold fire and defend yourself is now thinner than the tremor in his hand. October 22, 1961. East German Volkspolizei stop U.S. diplomat E. Allan Lightner's sedan at the border crossing into East Berlin and demand to see his passport. Lightner refuses. Under the Four-Power Agreement signed in 1945, Allied personnel have unrestricted access across all sectors of Berlin without checkpoint formalities. For 16 years that rule has held. Now, an East German border guard with a clipboard is erasing it, one stamped page at a time. If Lightner shows the passport, the Soviets gain legal precedent to demand identification from every American crossing the line. Lightner sits in his car for 40 minutes, engine idling, while the guard waits for him to comply. Neither man blinks. The Cold War's hottest flashpoint has just been triggered by a bureaucratic refusal. General Lucius Clay learns of the passport demand within 2 hours. Clay is President Kennedy's personal representative in Berlin, a veteran of the 1948 airlift, and a man who interprets every Soviet move as a probe for weakness. He sees the checkpoint dispute not as an administrative issue, but as a deliberate test. If Americans comply with the new passport rule, the Soviets can incrementally dismantle occupation rights, checkpoint by checkpoint, until Allied access exists only on paper. Clay decides the United States will not comply. His response will not involve lawyers or diplomatic cables. It will involve armor. Clay orders M48 Patton tanks to the checkpoint, supported by elements of the 6th Infantry. The tanks will not fire. Their guns will remain unloaded. But they will cross the line, and the East Germans will step aside. On October 23rd, 4 M48s roll up to the barrier with Lightner's sedan between them. The Volkspolizei guard looks at the 47-ton tanks, then waves the diplomat through without asking for identification. Clay has made his point. The passport rule appears to collapse after one armored demonstration. For 3 days, American officials cross into East Berlin under tank escort. The Soviets do not respond. The M48 Patton is a medium tank, built for the plains of Europe. It weighs 47 tons, mounts a 90mm main gun, and uses an optical rangefinder with manual fire control. The gunner looks through an eyepiece, measures distance with a stereoscopic rangefinder, and adjusts elevation by hand cranking a wheel. Every step requires attention and training. The system works at 800 to 1200 meters on open ground, where crews have time to range, acquire, and fire. No one designed it for 100-meter standoffs on a city street, where the first gunner to pull the trigger decides the outcome for both tanks. October 27, 5 p.m. 10 Soviet T-54 tanks roll forward from side streets near Checkpoint Charlie and stop. They are 100 meters from the American M48s. Their main guns are loaded, turrets trained forward, engine idling. According to eyewitness accounts, the Soviet tank commanders remain inside their vehicles, maintaining what appeared to be radio silence. They simply hold position. Clay's 3-day run of unopposed escorts has just ended. The Soviets are no longer stepping aside. They are standing in place with armor, matching the American deployment vehicle for vehicle. The passport dispute has become a tank standoff, and no one on either side has a doctrine for what happens next. Clay lacks a direct real-time telephone line to the White House. Every message from Berlin to Washington routes through State Department cables with a 4 to 6 hour delay. If Kennedy wants to recall the tanks, the order must travel through channels that were designed for diplomatic correspondence, not crisis response. By the time a withdrawal instruction reaches Clay, the tactical situation may have already forced the decision. Clay can commit American armor to a standoff that ties the president's hands, but Kennedy cannot pull Clay back in real time. The command chain runs one direction only, and that direction is slow. The Soviet T-54 mounts a 100mm D-10T gun. At close range, that gun will penetrate 200mm of armor. The M48's frontal armor is 110mm thick. The math is simple and final. If the Soviet gunner fires first, the round will punch through the American tanks and kill the crew in a single hit. The American 90mm gun has similar performance against the T-54's 120mm frontal armor. Both tanks are vulnerable. Both crews know it. The doctrine that assumed long-range engagements with time to maneuver has evaporated. At 100 meters, there is no second shot. There is only first shot and aftermath. U.S. Army tank doctrine assumes engagements begin at 800 to 1200 meters on open terrain. At those ranges, crews have time to range the target, coordinate fire, and reposition if the first shot misses. Tank commanders can radio for support. Forward observers can call in artillery. The system depends on space and time. At Checkpoint Charlie, Harper has neither. The Soviet tank is close enough that he can see the commander's face through his sight. If the T-54 moves, Harper has 3 seconds to decide whether it is repositioning or attacking. Under the strict rules of engagement, he has no time to consult superiors before responding to a threat. He has no direct line to high command for clearance. He has a firing lever and a manual reticle, and the rest is judgment. No radio protocol exists for de-escalation between US and Soviet tank commanders in 1961. If a T-54 starts its engine, Harper cannot call over and ask whether it is withdrawing or advancing. The tanks sit on different radio nets. The crews speak different languages. The only signal either side can send is movement, and movement is ambiguous. A tank reversing to reposition looks identical through an optical sight to a tank backing up to gain a better firing angle. The vibration from 10 idling engines makes it worse. Harper's reticle drifts. He compensates. The Soviet gunner compensates. Neither knows the other moved, and neither has a way to verify intent before the first round is fired. Clay orders the M48 tank commanders to load 90mm armor-piercing rounds and hold position. He interprets the Soviet deployment as a bluff designed to intimidate the Americans into withdrawing. If the US tanks pull back, the Soviets will have established that armor trumps Allied access rights. Clay believes the T-54s will leave if the Americans refuse to blink. He does not consult Washington before issuing the order, because by the time the cable reaches the White House and a reply comes back, the tactical moment will have passed. Clay is operating on his own judgment, and he has just committed loaded American tanks to a standoff with no scripted exit. Gunner chambers the round. The breech closes with a metallic snap that he feels in his chest. He centers his reticle on the lead T-54's turret ring, the seam where turret meets hull. That is the target. If he fires, the round will penetrate there and detonate inside, killing the crew instantly. His manual fire control system requires him to maintain continuous visual contact through the optical sight. If he looks away, even for a second, he must reacquire his aim. The gunner settles into the sight and begins the wait. His world contracts to the circle of the eyepiece, the vibration of the reticle, and the Soviet gunner 90 meters away who is doing exactly the same thing. In Washington, critical cables reach President Kennedy late that evening as the crisis unfolds. According to available records, the complex chain of command means any presidential directive must flow through the State Department, the Pentagon, and USA Ruhr headquarters in Heidelberg before reaching tactical units on the ground in Berlin. Kennedy grasps the reality. Clay has committed American armor to a direct confrontation with Soviet forces without presidential approval. The tanks are loaded. The crews are locked on target. By the time any withdrawal order could reach the street, the standoff may have already resolved itself, one way or another. Kennedy realizes he is watching a crisis where the decision authority has effectively transferred to commanders in the field. Kennedy instructs his brother Robert to contact Georgy Bolshakov, a Soviet agent who has served as a back channel for quiet negotiations. The message is simple. The United States will withdraw its tanks if the Soviets pull back first. But the message must travel through Bolshakov to Moscow, then from Khrushchev's office back to the Soviet tank commanders in East Berlin. That chain will take hours, perhaps longer. Kennedy chooses not to inform Clay directly that a deal is in progress, fearing that involving the headstrong general might compromise the delicate back-channel negotiations. If the Soviet tanks move before the secret message completes its circuit, historians suggest Kennedy feared Clay could interpret the movement as aggression and hold position, and the deal would collapse before either leader knew it existed. Khrushchev faces a calculation with no good answer. If he withdraws the T-54s without a visible American concession, Kremlin hardliners will accuse him of capitulating to the West. If he waits for Kennedy's back-channel offer to formalize, the American tank crews will remain on high alert for hours more, and exhausted gunners become unpredictable. Khrushchev has no secure way to communicate a withdrawal deal to Clay without making it public, and any public announcement will look like surrender. He must order the tanks to pull back in a way that signals de-escalation to Kennedy, but does not appear weak to Moscow. The only tool he has is movement itself, and movement is the one signal that can be misread as attack. Harper looks through an optical sight with 8 times magnification. To measure distance, he uses a rangefinder system that requires precise visual alignment. The crew must carefully match what they see through the optics. When the images align correctly, the range is set. He then adjusts the gun's elevation by hand-cranking a wheel beside his seat. Every step is manual. Every step requires attention. The system works well on a firing range where the target is stationary and the crew has time. But at Checkpoint Charlie, the vibration from idling engines makes the optical images drift. Harper must constantly realign them. If he loses concentration, even for a moment, the target lock is gone. There is no automation, no computer, just Harper's eyes, hands, and the discipline to hold focus for as long as the standoff lasts. At 100 meters, Harper's 90mm HVAP round will penetrate 210 millimeters of armor. The T-54's frontal armor is 120 millimeters thick. The round will punch through, shredding the interior with high-velocity fragments. The Soviet 100mm gun has similar performance. Its round will penetrate the M48's 110mm frontal plate and kill Harper's crew just as quickly. Both gunners know the math. Both know there is no margin for error. The first shot is the only shot that matters. If Harper fires and misses, tactical estimates suggest the Soviet gunner would have only a few critical seconds to return fire while Harper reloads. If the Soviet fires first, Harper has no time to respond. The manual fire control system offers no advantage. It simply transfers the decision to human reaction time, and at 100 meters, reaction time is not enough. The Soviet gunner is working with a manual fire control system, simpler than the American M48's stereoscopic rangefinder and ballistic computer, but built for the same fundamental task. He looks through an optical sight, estimates distance using the reticle markings, and adjusts elevation by hand. Both systems were designed in the same era, for the same kind of engagement. Both require the gunner to maintain continuous visual contact on the target, because any lapse means the opposing tank can fire unanswered. The T-54 gunner's reticle is centered on the American turret, just as the American gunner's is centered on his. They are locked in a mechanical mirror. Each adjustment one makes, the other must match. Each moment of inattention is an opportunity for the other to fire first. The symmetry is near absolute, and it makes the standoff impossible to resolve by technical advantage alone. Only endurance or orders can break it. After 6 hours without relief, fine motor control begins to degrade. The hand steadies less reliably on the firing lever. The eye drifts slightly in the sight. Small mistakes accumulate. After 12 hours, microsleeps begin. These are involuntary lapses in attention lasting 1 to 3 seconds, during which the brain shuts down briefly and the person is unaware it happened. For a tank gunner maintaining target lock, a 3-second microsleep is long enough for the opposing gunner to acquire, aim, and fire. No relief rotation was provided for the crews on the line. Harper and his counterpart across the asphalt must stay alert for as long as the standoff lasts. And the standoff has no scheduled end. No identification friend or foe system exists for ground armor in 1961. If the T-54's engine revs or the tank shifts position, Harper has 3 seconds to decide whether it is withdrawing or advancing to fire. He cannot radio the Soviet crew to ask. He cannot call a superior officer for confirmation. The M48 has no sensor that distinguishes a friendly movement from a hostile one. The decision rests entirely on Harper's interpretation of motion through an optical sight that is already shaking from engine vibration. If he waits to confirm and the tank is attacking, he dies. If he fires preemptively and the tank was withdrawing, he starts the war. The system offers no mechanism to verify intent, so every movement is ambiguous, and every ambiguous movement is lethal. Hour 14, 7 in the morning, October 28th. According to accounts from the crew, the gunner's hands shake on the firing lever. The tremor is reportedly visible to Harper, the tank commander, who reports it to Clay's staff. The response is that there are no reserve crews. The gunner is ordered to maintain position. His right eye aches from the pressure of the sight's rubber cup. His back is locked in a crouch that he can no longer straighten. The Soviet tank has not moved. Its engine is still idling. The vibration in the reticle makes it impossible to tell whether the T-54 is settling on its suspension or preparing to move. He tightens his grip to steady his hand, but that makes the shaking worse. 14 hours without relief. The mechanical chain is still intact, but the human link is failing. At 7:30 in the morning, Kennedy's back-channel message reaches Khrushchev through Bolshakov. The Americans will withdraw their tanks 30 minutes after the Soviets pull back. Khrushchev reads the message and faces the same problem Kennedy does. He has no secure way to communicate the deal to Clay without making it public, and no way to guarantee the American crews will recognize a coordinated Soviet withdrawal as de-escalation rather than repositioning for attack. If the U.S. gunners misread the movement, they will fire, and the deal will be irrelevant. Khrushchev must gamble that the tank crews on both sides are still alert enough to distinguish withdrawal from threat. At hour 14, that is not a safe bet. During the height of the standoff on the evening of October 27th, a lead Soviet T-54's engine pitch changes. In one American tank, a gunner's reticle jumps. His finger tightens on the firing lever. The vibration is worse now, or maybe it is just his hand shaking harder. He cannot tell the difference. His tank commander shouts, "Hold!" The gunner forces his finger to release pressure, but he cannot look away from the sight to verify the order. The T-54 is idling, not moving. The engine sound was a shift in RPM, nothing more. The American gunner's heart is slamming hard enough that he can feel it in his wrists. The Soviet gunner across the street just experienced the same moment, the same spike of adrenaline, the same question. Did the American tank move, or was it vibration? Neither crew knows how close they just came. Around mid-morning on October 28th, following back-channel negotiations between Moscow and Washington, Khrushchev's order reaches the front. Historical accounts describe a carefully choreographed withdrawal. The T-54s begin to reverse, one at a time, in a deliberate tit-for-tat sequence designed to signal de-escalation. Each tank waits for its American counterpart to match the movement before the next one pulls back. The pattern must be unmistakable, a synchronized dance of retreat that both sides can verify step by step. Khrushchev has telephone links to his own commanders, but no direct line to the American gunners across the checkpoint. He's relying on the hope that Kennedy's crews will recognize the choreography and hold their fire during the movement. The order goes out through Soviet channels. The tank commanders receive it. The engines engage. The T-54s begin to back away, 1 meter at a time, turrets still forward, guns still trained on the American positions. The gunner in the lead American tank watches through his sight as the T-54s back away. 1 meter. Then another. The movement is slow and synchronized. His reticle stays locked in the lead tank's turret ring because he has not been ordered to release target lock. According to dramatic accounts of the standoff, his hands are shaking badly now. The vibration in the sight makes it hard to distinguish the tank's movement from the tremor in his own muscles. His tank commander is watching through binoculars and calling the movement over the intercom. Reversing. Still reversing. Turrets forward. The gunner's finger is still on the firing lever. In some retellings of this moment, he realizes he cannot release it smoothly. The muscle control is gone. His commander reportedly has to reach down and physically lift the gunner's finger off the trigger. Only then does the gunner understand the standoff is ending. Historical records indicate the Soviet T-54s began their withdrawal from Checkpoint Charlie around 10:30 in the morning. Clay orders the M48s to pull back shortly thereafter, following the pattern established through back-channel negotiations Kennedy had pursued. The timing allows both sides to claim they did not capitulate first. The 16-hour standoff ends without a shot fired. No crew is relieved early. No tank suffers mechanical failure. The system held. But some historians suggest that Khrushchev's decision to order withdrawal may have come at a critical moment, as prolonged crew fatigue brought the tank commanders dangerously close to their physical limits. Had the standoff continued much longer, the risk of an accidental discharge due to exhaustion and impaired judgment might have eclipsed the influence of diplomatic negotiation. Following the standoff, American forces in Berlin began implementing organizational and operational changes. Tank crews on extended alert missions received guidance emphasizing crew rotation and relief procedures, addressing the physical and mental strain revealed during the 16-hour confrontation. Command structures were examined to improve communication between Berlin and Washington, though the formal establishment of the U.S. Army Berlin Brigade would not occur until December 1961. The experience highlighted factors that doctrine had not fully accounted for, that crew endurance and command communication could prove as critical as armor thickness and gun caliber. The assumption that tank battles would be decided purely by firepower and maneuver had not adequately considered the human operator under sustained psychological pressure. Military planners began treating operator fatigue not merely as a training concern, but as a fundamental constraint in armored operations. The M48 crews received no medals or public recognition. The incident remains classified for years because both superpowers need to maintain the narrative that their leaders controlled the outcome. Acknowledging that exhausted 19-year-old gunners held final decision authority for 16 hours would undermine the doctrine of rational nuclear deterrence. The official history records that General Clay and Premier Khrushchev successfully de-escalated a tense situation through diplomatic channels. It does not mention Harper's shaking hands, the microsleep risk at hour 14, or the fact that his tank commander had to physically lift his finger off the firing lever because his muscles no longer obeyed. Checkpoint Charlie becomes the symbol of Cold War brinkmanship, the place where East met West, and neither side blinked. Tourists visit the reconstructed guardhouse. Historians write about the tank standoff as a triumph of diplomatic restraint. But the 1961 incident reveals something the symbol obscures. Strategic deterrence theory assumed that nuclear-armed superpowers would make calculated decisions under pressure, that command and control systems would function as designed, and that human operators would remain reliable over extended crises. The 16 hours at Checkpoint Charlie showed that none of those assumptions held, when manual fire control, communication delays, and crew endurance limits were in play. The system did not prevent war through rational calculation. It avoided war through high-level diplomatic intervention, with Khrushchev ordering withdrawal while tank crews faced mounting physical and mental exhaustion after hours of sustained alert. Clay and Kennedy never answered the question the standoff left behind. If Khrushchev had delayed withdrawal by 2 more hours, would a young gunner's fatigue-impaired judgment have interpreted a Soviet engine start as an attack? Would a 3-second decision window have been enough to prevent the first shot of World War III? The fire control system gave him no automated verification. The command chain gave him no real-time guidance. The doctrine gave him no protocol for distinguishing withdrawal from threat at point-blank range. The entire structure of Cold War deterrence in that moment rested on whether a 19-year-old gunner with a manual reticle and 16 hours without sleep could tell the difference between a tank reversing and a tank preparing to fire. No one knows the answer because the test never completed. The Soviet tanks pulled back at hour 16. A finger came off the trigger, and the question remained open.